Grade 1 is often a rank that goes overlooked by the fans of Jujutsu Kaisen simply because the scale of power since the Shibuya incident arc has skyrocketed beyond compare. With characters like Yuta with his copy curse technique, Kenjaku with his curse spirit and gravity manipulation, and Yuki with her ability to create literal black holes, the power of your high-level grade 1 sorcerer has been relatively neglected. So with this versus battle, me and my friend Noop will be taking things back to the basics in pitting two very competent grade 1 sorcerers against one another. Kento Nanami versus Mei Mei. The uptight, overprotective salaryman versus the money-grubbing opportunist. In order to find out who will come out on top, we need to take a look at these two sorcerers' showings. Starting with Nanami, we can just go over some of his general feats, some of his attack potency scaling, speed scaling, durability, and things like that. And Noah, how do you really think Nanami shapes up throughout the story of JJK?
So throughout the story of JJK, I mean, Nanami is pretty much the pinnacle of what a grade 1 sorcerer really is. He's really just our first introduction to that level of power. And I think for being an introduction of that, what we see him when in his fight with Mahito, where he goes into overtime, and even though Mahito is in an infancy kind of stage at this moment, he's still able to incapacitate him for the moment. And later on in the Shibuya arc, when he takes on Dagon, he does present some decent feats, and he is able to work with Naobito and Maki in somewhat of a team, so he's definitely a great asset.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Nanami early on in the story is shown as a pretty competent sorcerer. He seems to scale relative to, if not above, Yuji in terms of his ability to fight close quarters against Mahito. Obviously, he's able to sync up with Yuji's attacks, Yuji being someone that is actually more dangerous to Mahito than Nanami, so that's kind of impressive that Nanami is able to keep up with the ratio technique regardless. Obviously, Yuji at this point is considered by Megami just straight up the strongest or fastest or just generally most superior close combat specialist that they have on their team, as he mentions in Goodwill. And that's a Yuji pre-Cursed Energy, pre any of the training he did in pre-Mahito fight, all things that should basically lead to a power-up on his part. Megami is still basically saying that, yeah, Maki, you're cooked. Panda, you're cooked. Everybody's cooked in a 1v1 with Yuji. Yuji's him. So Yuji should be a pretty good benchmark of physical might and just straight up attack power and speed, generally speaking. As you mentioned, in Shibuya, he has other feats where he's in overtime the entire time. He's able to react to the attacks of Dagon, both outside of the domain and within the context of the domain. We know that this once again solidifies his scaling above the likes of Maki, at least physically, because Maki several times throughout her fight, or several times throughout her aspect of the fight rather, is sort of cornered or pushed to her very limits against Dagon, where I think that he is holding back quite a bit. I mean, he just explicitly says so, that he's allocating 70% of his resources to take down Naobito, 30% to take down Nanami, and Maki, he doesn't even allocate any of his sure hit technique just because of how little he thinks of her.
Yeah, and Nanami, specifically the ratio technique itself, really gives him a lot of versatility. It really is one of those techniques where even if you're going up against someone that's a lot stronger than you, or has an advantage over you, the ratio technique is going to be able to at least level that somewhat. Because at the end of the day, the attacks that Nanami is going to be striking with do have that added critical ability to actually either take off a limb or, depending on how durable it is, at least do some sort of damage to them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we look at just straight ability and raw, like, attack power, Ino says, I think it's in chapter 94, that Nanami and Yuji should probably have similar straight raw ability. Now, it's somewhat ambiguous that it's ambiguous as to whether or not Ino is counting the ratio technique or not. You could be charitable to Nanami and say that Ino is basically saying, just in terms of pure striking power, if both of them just throw a punch, no technique imbued, just cursed energy enhancements, Nanami and Yuji should probably equal out, and then with ratio technique, it goes even beyond that. I'm sort of inclined to think that he's encompassing the ratio technique in attacks. But like I said, even if you're sort of gracious to Nanami and his abilities, he should be scaling relative, at least in striking power, to Shibuya Yuji. In terms of speed, he should be closer to those Goodwill arcs of Yuji, because we do see that Yuji gets stronger multiple times. Toto mentions it, and then he also hits a Black Flash, which is just outright stated to amp the cursed energy usage and control of a sorcerer. I think that's stated in chapter 49. So
you also have to imagine, like, his durability is not even something to mess with as well, considering when Haruta, right, tries to kick him, he's compared to literally like a stone wall, right?
Yeah. Like Haruta just slices him and thinks he doesn't even comprehend initially that he didn't cut him, and then he kicks him and he feels like it's a brick wall as well. Nanami is just completely decimating him, and Nobara, someone who has fought alongside Yuji and someone that has fought Eso and Kejizu, saw what Nanami did and was just stun locked at the idea that someone this powerful was a grade 1. She saw him and was like, wow, this right here is the epitome of a grade 1 sorcerer, right? Keep in mind, she's hit a Black Flash before. She's fought Eso and Kejizu, both characters that were able to put up fights against Yuji all the way in the Origin of Obedience arc. But Nanami showing up and no diffing Haruta just completely stuns her. So Nanami, in terms of a more narrative and feat-based standpoint, is pretty high up in the Jujutsu Kaisen power levels, at least when you're looking at it in the context of grade 1 sorcerers. Now,
especially in overtime.
Especially in overtime, because it's stated that he's in overtime by Gege in Shibuya, and that just makes sense considering that all of the events in Shibuya happen after he would be clocked out. So overtime Nanami is really just wildly more powerful than his base form. I don't know, honestly, if we have that much good scaling for base Nanami, just because most of the time he's shown fighting, he actually isn't in his base form. But I think we, just due to the overwhelming amounts of showings overtime Nanami has, we can kind of take a guesstimate of what his full potential power looks like.
For sure. I definitely agree.
Yeah, now, moving on to Mei Mei, just to give a little bit of a comparison, I think Mei Mei is also someone that is in those upper echelons of grade 1 sorcerers. She states that she has honed her body and curse energy usage to its physical max. And I don't know if you think that every person in JJK has a sort of cap on their abilities, or that everyone has a similar cap on their abilities. But if not, Mei Mei's basically saying, yeah, this is as strong as a grade 1 gets, right? Physically, I'm it. I don't know if you think that there's a little bit of a difference, but Mei Mei does basically say she's no slouch in the physical department. And I think she corroborates that quite a bit as she breaks through the smallpox deities' sure hit domain attacks over and over again.
Yeah, the boulders, I'm sure, are not easy to break regardless of her weapon. So, like, she definitely presents great feats as far as attack power goes. I think her maximizing her body is nothing to really scoff at. I mean, I'm sure everyone that you talk to, or everyone in the Jujutsu Kaisen world, has their own personal limits. Whether or not you'll actually ever reach those is really hard to say. I feel like a lot of people can train every day, all day, and never reach their limits.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something to be said for someone like Mei Mei to reach a level of power where she's like, I literally can't get stronger no matter what I do. So let's take it back a little bit. And one thing that I really want to focus on is why Mei Mei even maximized her body strength to begin with, was because she was born with a curse technique that let her control crows. That's the whole reason she even did this, was because her whole curse technique was so she was able to see through crows, control crows. And to be honest, in a world where people are doing crazy shit all the time, that's not really the best thing that you want to do. So someone like Mei Mei said, all right, what can I do? I'm going to train my body to the peak in order to not be held down by my curse technique, which that level of mindset alone is already showing you that you're dealing with someone dangerous. Let alone adding that mindset to once she hit a limit and she hit a roadblock in that training path, instead of then saying, okay, I've reached as strong as I can, this is it. She then says, you know what? I'm gonna go back and figure out how I can make this controlling crows work and how I can make this benefit me. In which case she came out with Blackbird Strike. So overall, not even just her physical strength, her level of mind and her intelligence is on a different level of something that we have yet to see in the series. She's someone that's determined enough to get the win no matter what she needs to do, and she's also smart enough to give herself an out or give herself an extra way to win in any kind of sticky situation. Because she's also the kind of smart where she's not going to lose, she's just going to dip out.
For sure. Mei Mei is definitely a very tactical fighter and a very not prideful one. She is not a sort of character that you see in a typical shonen where they're like, I refuse to win this way. No, Mei Mei will win by any means. And I mean, it's shown that she kind of uses everything and everyone at her disposal if she's pushed in that situation. Now, this is somewhat of a funny question, a little bit of an interesting one. Is Ui Ui standard equipment for Mei Mei? Does she walk into any given battle with him on the field? It's just a little bit of a funny question. I don't think Ui Ui is probably that useful as a combatant against someone that doesn't have a domain like Nanami, but I always wonder, just does she ever go anywhere in a fight without him? Like, is she pulling up to a serious battle without her battle X and without Ui Ui with the simple domain?
Absolutely not. I feel like I was actually talking about this on one of my other streams when someone asked this question. And I'm under the impression that in fighting games they have duo characters where two characters come packaged together because their movesets directly intertwine. Like, that's how I feel like Mei Mei is. I mean, sure. I'm even under the kind of headcanon or theory that like Ui Ui isn't even like a real person and is literally like a curse tool or something that Mei Mei even made so she can, like, if she split her genes or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if Mei Mei just seems like that kind of person that would do that kind of shit. Whether it be her little brother that she's completely manipulating in other ways, who knows?
We've seen characters just indoctrinate other sorcerers into the field, like Seance Granny, right? Ogami. It's just stated that she just picks up people from orphanages, trains them to be her servants or her vessels for reincarnated sorcerers, and then just uses them. I wouldn't put it past Mei Mei to be like, dang, my technique isn't really that crazy. Let me recruit somebody. Let me go find some kid off the street that has some potential. I'm gonna teach you some abilities that are necessary to help me. Exactly, yeah. Let's train you up a little bit, right? Completely in character for Mei Mei. I think like Ui Ui is to Mei Mei what Nemu is to Mayuri almost. It's just like, yeah, this is what I walk into a fight with. This is part of my arsenal, and I definitely think that can throw a character off if you're in what's perceived to be one-on-one, and then just this completely unknown entity jumps into it, even if they're not all that strong, just to throw off your game. But back to her physical abilities and her curse technique a little bit. Yeah, Noam harped on some good things here. Mei Mei does kind of just say, yep, I'm at my physical peak. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the physical peak of every character potentially in the series. Obviously, we have people like Yuji, we have people like Naobito now. You have characters that could surpass it in other fields physically, but Mei Mei does seem pretty confident in her physical abilities, and she does seem confident in assessing Yuji's abilities based on her seeing Yuji's fight in both Goodwill and against the Grasshopper Curse, which to me implies that she perceives herself to be strong enough to make an assessment on Yuji, right? She can accurately determine how powerful Yuji is, and to me, that's not something that you can do if you're vastly weaker or not even in the same ballpark as somebody, you know what I mean? Now, onto bird manipulation and specifically bird strike. There's always, we've talked about this before on our Toji videos, but Bird Strike is such an interestingly vague ability in terms of how it's described in terms of attack potency, because she just mentions that no one except Gojo has ever been hit by Bird Strike and lived, which is such an ambiguous statement. And do you want to get into like why it's so ambiguous, why it's so like, it's almost such a non-statement in and of itself?
Yeah, because it's kind of like hard to say, because that could mean so many different things. Like, I mean, like Gojo has Limitless, of course, so it makes sense why Bird Strike wouldn't really kill him or at least take him out. But that basically begs the question of, okay, well, who have you hit, and who you know what are the criteria to survive? Because I mean, if she's only hit Gojo and then the only other 3 people she's ever hit with it are fodder, that's not that leaves such a gap in between to say, okay, what's really the level of damage here?
Exactly. It just leaves a lot to be desired in terms of statement. I will say though that the implication to me seems that Mei Mei is very confident in Bird Strike surpassing her own attack potency. And I don't know if you get the same vibe, but to me, Mei Mei sort of thinks of this as her trump card, as almost her purple in this scenario, right? Like, it's the pinnacle of her ability, at least that we've seen thus far. And the fact that she basically seems confident that nobody except Gojo that she's going to realistically fight can survive it. I would say it's fair to say that anybody that she's aware of, whether that be Yuji, whether that be Kusakabe, Nanami, any other sorcerer that is in the grade 1 realm, to me, it's fair to say that she basically thinks, yeah, you're not Gojo, you're probably gonna die, because she knows about these characters, she works with these characters day in and day out, right? She's a very competent, intelligent sorcerer. Would it be that weird for her statement to apply to people that she knows about, excluding Gojo specifically because she knows it shouldn't work on him with the Limitless, or hell, maybe she's even tried it on him just for the fun of it, right? Just to see if it could work. So I definitely think that while the statement isn't super overt, it's not super definitive, and you could call into question some of the validity of some of its statements or some of its meaning, I would say that the implication sort of lies with Mei Mei's Bird Strike being, at least within the context of this versus battle, being a win con. If it hits, that's kind of the winning scenario in this versus battle, whereas Nanami's winning scenario is hitting her with a ratio technique. Because to be honest with you, I don't think either of these characters are just straight tanking the other person's attacks. Like Mei Mei, I don't think has demonstrated the durability to just tank a ratio technique to the arm and survive. But I also don't think that Nanami has demonstrated the durability, even though he's shown some like very high capabilities, being able to survive Jogo's Fire Blast, being able to survive Dagon's sure hit techniques for a little bit. I don't know if that means he's straight up tanking Bird Strike with no damage, especially when we consider the fact that Mei Mei never really goes into a fight without multiple birds, which means multiple potential bird strikes that are just going to be hitting you from every single angle.
Exactly. You pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's really what is the hardest thing, and it's going to be the hardest thing for really not just Nanami, any sorcerer that goes up against Mei Mei, who she deems is enough of a threat to even use Bird Strike with. Yeah. Now I may be on a little bit of a different page than you, in a sense that I do think, given the placement of the attack, Mei Mei would be able to not so much tank, but I think she would be able to continue fighting if she lost an arm from ratio technique or not. I think she is. I think she's got that dog in her.
Okay.
I think she could do it. I think she could take, even with one arm down, I think she could at least finish the fight. And like you said, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with the multiple birds at once, whereas even if Nanami can get close and can land a ratio technique, who says that Mei Mei would even let him get that far? Because if she's familiar with him, she knows what the ratio technique can do. She knows what it will do to her. Why would she ever even let that get to the chance? Unless she really feels like she can handle him in a close quarters combat, which close quarters combat, I think Mei Mei and Nanami are probably pretty evenly matched. Regardless of what she says, her physical capabilities are maxed out. I feel like Nanami, with what you just described as Nanami being somewhat comparable, at least to a certain degree, of an earlier Yuji in the series before he surpasses him, of course, would be able to keep up with Mei Mei's battle axe and be able to keep up with any kind of taijutsu that she really has. So I think her only chance is using Blackbird, which, like you said, is pretty much a win condition. And she even says it herself, where the only way to then exceed your limits once you've then surpassed your physical capabilities, your curse technique capabilities, is to then offer yourself up as a binding vow, as a sacrifice.
Exactly.
To fully maximize your power, which, as we've seen even as so far back in Volume 0 with Yuta and Rika, it really doesn't matter who you are. If you're giving your whole life up as a binding vow, it's going to be a very significant, very lethal blow.
Exactly. It's a very powerful, like, limit surpasser type of attack. So if you think that Mei Mei and Nanami are even at all relative, you would basically have to concede the point that Bird Strike is going to surpass Nanami's durability to some extent. As we've seen, basically every time someone is giving up their life to amplify their technique, it basically surpasses anything that they've been able to do up to this point. And that makes sense, right? The binding vow is, hey, give up my life for all of my power, right? That's kind of how it goes. The only thing I could see in Nanami's favor is maybe you think Mei Mei's speed scaling is a bit more vague, just because we don't see her go up against that many different characters. We don't know how our fight with Kenjaku ended up going and things of that nature. I will say, though, that unless you think Nanami is for some reason in overtime just straight up blitzing Mei Mei, which I wouldn't necessarily say is the case, you're going to be hard-pressed to have Nanami overcome the several bird strike potential abilities that she has. Her using Ui Ui definitely as a human shield at some point in the fight. If it gets that dangerous, Ui Ui's jumping in the way, blocking the attack. Like, it just is happening. It's something that he would do in character. It's something that maybe would make him do in character. And I could see Nanami having trouble attacking him just based off of his like sort of protectiveness of children in general, as we kind of see continuously throughout the story. In either way, I think Mei Mei is strong enough, or is implied to be strong enough. She seems to have maxed out her physical stats. She seems to view Yuji as someone that she can make proper assessments on. And even if you think Nanami is somewhat in a little bit of a higher physical ballpark, I think Bird Strike is kind of hyped up to be more powerful, or at least a bit more of a potent ability, just because it gives up a crow's life in exchange for just maxed out cursed energy. We've seen it completely decimate through special grades, not just break off a piece of them, but just outright exercise it. I don't know if we've ever seen Nanami do that to any special grade that he's fought. With Dagon, he outright takes the ratio technique, and with Mahito, he blows off his arm, but he doesn't even cleave it off in two, it just breaks. So you could definitely call into question how much powerful or how much more powerful the bird strike is than Nanami's ratio technique. So while it is somewhat contentious, and I think there could be arguments made for Nanami, I would say that 9 times out of 10, I'd have Mei Mei winning the fight.
I completely agree with you. I think when it comes down to it, I think overall it does come down to how many birds she has in the moment. Depending on how the close quarters battles go, I think that's a little bit more of a toss-up. However, when it comes down to perfect environment where Mei Mei has at least more than one bird, where even if Nanami dodges one, she can set one up cleverly, which we've already established she has the intelligence to do. It's pretty much a wash. Not so much a wash as in a sense that Nanami doesn't have a chance, but so much as if he gets hit with one bird strike, it's over. And if she can just keep using them to a point where she can catch him off guard, then yeah. And they're birds, so they can attack from up, down, sideways, left to right.
Yeah, and then Nanami will be pressed by Mei Mei physically anyways, so Mei Mei can definitely push Nanami to not be able to factor in the birds into his combat strategy. So I 100% think that Mei Mei more often than not takes the victory against Nanami.
Bam.
Yeah. Thanks to Noop for coming out here, saying, helping me out with this versus battle. As always, guys, you know what to do. Subscribe to both me and him. Like the video, do all that good stuff. We're gonna keep putting out these versus battles so long as you guys keep watching and enjoying them. So thank you guys for that.
Thanks, Broken Ronin, for having me. I always appreciate it. Always will enjoy talking about these versus battles. Please subscribe to Broken Ronin.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.